Sakya Hariboda. Could someone get the right board, please? Thank you. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Good afternoon, everyone. Alrighty, so we are officially starting on the Eightfold Path, which is the fourth noble truth of the Four Noble Truths. And so last week we concluded the fourth noble truth, or at least I went over the fourth noble truth. And so we'll start with the first section of the three categories of the Eightfold Path fall under, which is wisdom, morality, and meditation. So I'm going to attempt, if I can not word vomit too much today and go over the first section or the first category of wisdom, prajna. So we'll cover right view and right intention. So just to quickly summarize. So I have to recollect what I wrote down. Okay. So the Eightfold Path is essentially the path, right? So the Four Noble Truths, as we discussed, goes over the causes of our suffering. It is the truths of our reality, right? And what causes the suffering, why we suffer. As we go down through the list, especially as we get to the fourth noble truth, which is the cessation to that suffering. And the path to the cessation of that suffering is the Eightfold Path. So as long as we follow the Eightfold Path and live by the recommendations and the resources that the Eightfold Path provides, then we're guaranteed essentially to a degree to live a moral, just, happy life. So again, we'll cover right view today, which is samyak drishti in Sanskrit. And so right view here is the deep understanding and the kind of the deep understanding of the Four Noble Truths, right? Right view is, as I mentioned last time, is first because we have to have that right view in order to see and understand everything before we think it, before we see it, before we do it, and before we live by it. And so to understand how our life, our reality, and nature really is, right? That things are impermanent. And so it begins with the intuitive insight that all beings are subject to suffering. And it ends with that complete understanding of the true nature of reality, of the true nature of all things. To essentially see things as they are, to melt away the ignorance that we have of life. And right view is also the ability to distinguish between wholesome and unwholesome roots, right? And so we all know kind of, was that Friday during the sutra class? We discussed how our consciousness, our mind, is a field, right? And that we plant seeds of wholesomeness or unwholesomeness in this field. And depending on what seeds we water is what will essentially become, right? So as long as we water wholesome seeds, then wholesomeness will be the fruit, right? If we water unwholesome seeds, then unwholesomeness will be the fruit. And so we have complete control, essentially, over that progress of how our lives would be. And of course, as we start to practice mindfulness more and become more aware of our reality, that helps us identify all the seeds in that store consciousness, alaya vijnana, right? Alaya vijnana is the 8th of the 8 consciousnesses that we know of. And so as long as we water those wholesome seeds and wholesomeness, wholesome fruits will grow. Think of reactions, right? Our reactions are a direct influence of the seeds that we've planted, right? So you can see one person and react in an uncomfortable way, right? And you're like, ugh, this person. Or if you see someone else and you react happily or excitedly, right? It is because of the seeds that we've planted. It's because of the water, it's the seeds that we've watered and sorry, the children are distracting. So I don't like children. And so as long as we are mindful enough and become aware of exactly what is happening in the mind, because again, if you think back of how we react to things, it is our reactions that will either cause you to suffer or to be happy, right? But even the seeds of Buddhahood, for instance, right? The capacity to wake up, the capacity to become enlightened and to see things as they truly are, is also present in us, right? Which is why we bow to each other, right? This is why we are humble and we try to be conducive in this sangha, in this community, because we are all we are all future Buddhas, right? And so as we help each other practice and grow, we're essentially helping and becoming attendants to future Buddhas, right? It may take us eons to become a Buddha, but it is still going to happen, right? Eventually. And so when we're bowing to each other, we're bowing to a future Buddha, right? Like I'm bowing to you, you're bowing to me. And so this in itself is watering that seed of enlightenment. It's watering that seed of practice. It is watering the capacity to see that everyone, regardless of who they are, what they've done, what they're doing, all have that potential of enlightenment. And so right view is to recognize which seeds are wholesome and to encourage those seeds to be watered, and which seeds are unwholesome and to essentially let them dry out, let them die. But at the base of our views are our perceptions, right? In Sanskrit, it's samjana, right? And the Buddha had advised us not to be fooled by our perceptions. And he had told Subhuti, one of his main disciples, that where there is perceptions, there's deception, right? And the Buddha had taught on many occasions that our perceptions are typically erroneous, right? And that most of our suffering comes from wrong perceptions, which is why we always have to ask ourselves over and over again, am I sure, right? The same kind of examples we've covered in meditation classes or in sutra classes, that whenever you see something out in the world, whether it's a car accident or distractions that arise during meditation, right? And the stories that we create behind those distractions or sounds or sights or smells or tastes or whatever, always ask yourself, am I sure? Am I sure of what I'm seeing? Am I sure of what I'm feeling? Am I sure of what is actually going on? Or am I just making up excuses or stories according to my own perceptions? And of course, the source of our perceptions, our way of seeing, lies in that store consciousness of ours, right? That alaya vijnana, this store consciousness. So we have 8 consciousnesses whew, that's a long word, right? So the first 6 are just our sense consciousness, right? Sound, smell, taste, touch, and what am I missing? Sound, smell, taste, touch, sight, and mind, right? And then the 7th consciousness is kind of the mixing bucket, where all those senses go into the bucket, and this bucket is what creates our reactions, right? So according to what you smell, you're gonna be like, oh, I like this, or I don't like this. According to what you hear, I like this, I don't like this, etc., etc. And then the 8th consciousness, the store consciousness, what we call alaya, vijnana, this is where everything's housed. It's kind of like our thumb, it's our memory, right? Just think of a hard drive, right? Everything, that's where everything is stored. That's where everything is kept, right? So all our actions, all our thoughts, all our speech, all our experiences, all our decision making, all this is stored in this 8th consciousness. And this 8th consciousness is what makes us, right? But because of our perceptions, right, and because of our perceptions are created based on our senses, if we were all to go outside and look at the cloud, right, if 20 of us go outside and look at the cloud, we're going to have 20 different perceptions of what this cloud looks like, right? Some of us may see a car, some may see a smiley face, some may see a butterfly, some may see nothing, but we all are going to see something different. And so because we see it all differently, then you can ask, well, who's right? Who's wrong? If we're all seeing something different, that means that cloud is wrong. Something is wrong. Either the cloud is wrong, or I'm wrong, or you're wrong, or we're all wrong, right? We can't all be right, and we can't all be wrong. So that gives you a sense that our perceptions may not be all that accurate, right? And of course, our perceptions, all our perceptions carry with them our airs of subjectivity, right? So then we start to blame, we start to praise, we condemn, we complain, all depending on our perceptions. But our perceptions are made up of our afflictions, of our cravings, of our desires, our anger, our ignorance, our wrong views, right? And our prejudice and discriminations. And so whether we are happy or we suffer depends on our perceptions. So that's why it's important to look deeply at our perceptions and know their source. Where are they coming from? Which then leads us to our idea of happiness, right? We believe that only certain conditions will make us happy. But it's often our very idea of happiness that actually prevents us from being happy in the first place. Because we have to look deeply into our perceptions in order to be able to be free from them. This is our perceptions, again, if there's perception, there's deception. So our perception of happiness is deceptive, it's error, it's erroneous, it's false. Then, as we start to look deeply into it, then that perception becomes an insight, a realization of the correct path that we need to walk on. So this is neither perception nor non-perception. It is a clear vision and seeing of things. It's a clear vision of seeing things as they are. Think of another example. Think of how we can't explain what an orange looks like to someone. Okay? We can't explain what an orange tastes like to someone who's never had an orange, right? No matter how well we describe the orange, no matter how much detail we provide of how the orange looks, its size, its texture, its color, right? All the different aspects that create an orange. No matter how well we try to describe that orange to someone, they can never actually experience what that orange tastes like, right? Because the moment we even open our mouths to explain what an orange tastes like, we're already in wrong perception. We're already in wrong view. It's already wrong, right? Because that is something that has to be experiential. right? It cannot just be described. And so our perceptions they work just like that, right? You can't, for instance, if you come to the temple, you have an idea of coming to the temple, right? But that is simply just your idea of the temple. It isn't really the temple. You can say, oh, I've been to Fukuoka Buddhist temple. But in fact, you've only been to your idea of the temple, right? Because your idea may be slightly better than someone else's idea who's never been to the temple, but it's still an idea. So your concept or perception of reality is not really reality. So you are caught up in your perceptions and ideas. When you are caught up in your perceptions and ideas, you lose reality. So then the Buddha tells us to practice is to go beyond ideas. So you can arrive at the suchness of things. No idea is the path of non-conception. As long as there is an idea, there is no reality, no truth. No idea means no wrong idea, no wrong conception. It does not mean no mindfulness, because of mindfulness, when something is right, we know it's right, and when something is wrong, we know it's wrong. So the same thing when we're sitting in meditation, right? And if you're sitting in meditation, you're focusing on your breath or your object in meditation, and an image of food arises in the mind, right? You may think, oh, I've lost concentration. My meditation is ruined because now I'm thinking about food instead of my breath or the object in meditation. But in reality, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing in meditation, is that recognition of something that arose other than your object of meditation, right? So I often hear that people say, oh, I keep thinking, like I'm thinking, I know I'm thinking. I'm like, well, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, knowing that you're thinking, right? Meditation isn't just about sitting and not thinking, right? Trying to clear your mind. That's clearly impossible, right? And it makes no sense. It's nonsensical. The object of meditation is that when you're sitting in meditation and you're concentrating on your object of meditation, whether it's your breath or you're visualizing something or whatever it may be, whatever arises, the knowing of that object arising is what you're supposed to be doing in meditation. So even if you got distracted, the mindfulness that you have of knowing that you got distracted is meditation. So you can think, you can get distracted all you want, but as long as you know you're thinking and being distracted, you've accomplished, you've succeeded in your meditation, right? So don't think of it, oh, I've got distracted, I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking about food, I'm thinking about work tomorrow, I'm thinking about this or that, whatever it may be. Think all you want, but know that you're thinking. That's the object. I went off topic, sorry. Back to our perceptions. So relatively speaking, there are, of course, right views and wrong views, right? But if we look more deeply, we can see that all views are wrong views, because no view can ever be the truth. And it's just from one point, and that's why we call it point of view, right? If we go to another point, we'll see things differently and realize that our first view was not entirely correct. So from the viewpoint of ultimate reality, right view is the absence of all views. Another kind of similar example of seeing clouds differently is seeing the moon, right? So people from like the southern hemisphere, if you take a picture of the moon, you're going to see it in that specific viewpoint, right, with all its craters and shadows and whatnot. But those on the southern hemisphere, if they take a picture of the moon, it's going to be different. It's going to be from a different point of view, right? So it's going to have different shadows, different craters and whatnot. And if the two people compare the photos, like, hey, your photo of the moon doesn't look like my photo of the moon. Your moon must be wrong, mine must be right. And so now they're arguing about whose moon is the real moon, when both moons are correct, but they're just from different perspectives, right? So that's right view. I've already overspoken on that. So next we have right thinking or right intention, samyak samkalpa. And right intention here refers to the volitional aspect, the mental energy to control our speech and actions. Right? This is where our commitment to morality, ethics, and self-improvement comes in place. This is where we start ridding ourselves of whatever qualities we know to be wrong and immoral. And if we're able to train ourselves in right thinking, then our right view will also naturally improve. The Buddha explains that right intention is threefold: the intention of renunciation, the intention of goodwill, and the intention of harmlessness. Again, that's the intention of renunciation, intention of goodwill, and the intention of harmlessness. This is kind of something we've slightly touched on the other day too, is how our intention is, how impactful our intention is, right? And we were speaking, because we're talking about the Amitabha Sutra and what qualifies good men and good women that's described in the sutra. And those that are considered good men or good women are those that follow the 5 precepts and practice the 10 good deeds, right? And the precepts especially is something that, though they are guidelines that we need to live our life with, right? Abstain from killing, abstain from stealing, abstain from sexual misconduct, abstain from lying, and abstain from intoxicants. Though these are vows and promises we make to ourselves, they aren't always cemently held, right? Because we're going to unintentionally break one or more of those precepts quite often, right? For instance, the very first precept of not killing, right, or more correctly, the protection of life, is something that we unintentionally break almost every day, right? Whether you're walking down a path, you're walking in a park, right? We're accidentally stepping on bugs that is taking life, and you're driving down the road, flies and other bugs and stuff are slamming into the windshield. Maybe a deer or a dog or a cat runs in the middle of the road and you've ran them over. And so we take life almost every day, right? Even brushing our teeth, right? We're killing germs, technically, too. And that's also the taking life. But we don't have the intent, we don't have a malicious ill will intention behind that when those things happen, right? And because our intention isn't malicious necessarily, for the most part, for most of us, right? It's not kind of that big of a deal in a way. And so our intention is very important. We have to have the intention of goodwill, the intention behind our speech and actions is what's going to influence what is considered right intention or right thinking. And so if our intentions are right, then the actions will be right. And for the intentions to be right, the surest guarantee is right view. The Buddha kind of sums this up when he says that for a person who holds a wrong view, his deeds, words, plans, and purposes grounded in that view will lead to suffering. While for a person who holds right view, his deeds, words, plans, and purposes grounded in that view will lead to happiness. And so then we come to these the threefold intentions. And the first intention is of renunciation. And the Buddha gives us a message that the pull of desire is to be resisted and eventually abandoned. Desire is to be abandoned not because it is morally evil, but because it is the root of suffering. Thus, renunciation, turning away from craving and its drive for gratification, becomes the key to happiness, to freedom from the hold of attachment. Now, this I've heard this multiple times, and I even put like a little side note on here that every time I bring up the word or the concept of renunciation, people think that, oh, I need to leave the home life and enter the monastery or become a monk or nun. That's not really what renunciation here means. Renunciation in this form just means the ability to let go of what cannot be controlled, right? The ability to be able to accept that less is more, pretty much, right? That the attainment of deliverance requires a complete eradication of craving, and the progress along the path is accelerated to the extent that the path is accelerated to the extent that one overcomes craving. And since craving is the origin of dukkha, or of suffering, putting an end to suffering depends on eliminating craving, and that involves directing the mind to renunciation. So it's the ability to recognize that craving, right, the cause of our suffering, second noble truth, is the main villain in our life story that causes us to suffer. It's because of our craving of things that we want, craving of the things that we can't have, craving of things to be different, craving of things to want to go our way when they don't go our way. And so then the tool that the Buddha holds out for us to free that mind from desire is just understanding. So real renunciation is not a matter of compelling ourselves to give up things when we inwardly still have that craving for them, but changing our perspective on them so that they no longer bind us, they no longer cause us to be attached to them. And so when we're able to understand the nature of desire, when we investigate it closely with keen attention, then that desire falls away by itself without the need to struggle, without the need to hold on to them. The second type of intention is the intention of goodwill, which of course which opposes the intention of ill will. So Buddha tells us that there are two ineffective ways of handling ill will. One is to yield to it, to express the aversion by bodily or verbal action. And this way, of course, releases that tension that we have sometimes, right? That helps where we act out, right, to get it out of our system. We all know what we're talking about, right? But that in itself causes some dangers when we try to yell it out or act it out to get it out of our system. And that has dangers because it causes, or it tends to breed within us resentment and provokes retaliation and creates enemies, right? It poisons relationships and causes toxic relationships, and it generates a lot of unwholesome karma. But in the end, that ill will doesn't really leave our system, really. But instead it drives down deeper and becomes more solid and more cemented in us. And because it's being fed instead of starved, it starts to impair our thoughts and our deeds and our conduct. The other approach is repression, which also fails to kind of get rid of that destructive force of ill will, because it turns around and just kind of pushes everything inward, right? Where it becomes transformed into self-contempt, where it causes chronic depression, or a tendency to rationally just act out in violence. And so the remedy that the Buddha recommends to counter ill will, especially when that object of ill will is against someone else, is the practice of metta, loving kindness. So metta is an intense feeling of selfless love for all beings, right? And there's also a meditation, a metta meditation that is practiced. And the metta meditation that we practice is essentially building up that love that we have for all beings, regardless of who they are, right? Without exception. And so in the Loving Kindness or the Metta Sutra, the Buddha kind of provides a type of formula that we would use or recite in order to help guide and build up that metta within us. So it always starts with ourselves, obviously, right? And there's different variations of this formula, but essentially you want to recite to yourself, may I be happy, may I be at ease, may my mind be free, may I be free from suffering, may I be healthy, etc., right? Positive, what's the word I'm looking for? Affirmations almost, right? And you do that for yourself, and then you switch to someone that is close to you, whether it's a significant other, a parent, a sibling, or children, and you do the same formula for them. And you switch over to someone that is just an acquaintance, right? It could be a coworker or a neighbor, and you repeat the same formula to them. And you then switch to a complete stranger, right? The mailman, the cashier at HEB, or whatever it may be. And you switch over to someone you may dislike or dislikes you, right? And so you're practicing this loving kindness. You're building up this tolerance of loving kindness for all beings. And you're sharing that to develop that goodwill. The third and last intention is the intention of harmlessness. And the intention of harmlessness here is guided by compassion. And compassion here, karuna, is aroused to oppose our cruel, aggressive, and violent thoughts. Loving kindness had that characteristic of wishing for the happiness and welfare of all beings. And compassion has the characteristic of wishing that all beings be free from suffering. So it's a deeper practice than just loving kindness. And it springs up by considering that all beings, like ourselves, wish to be free from suffering. I can guarantee you there's not a single person or being in the world that doesn't want to, that wants to suffer, right? Because nobody wants to suffer, and then you're like, all right, well, we at least have that in common, right? So you can meet people who are complete opposites to you, where you think you have nothing in common, right? Whether it's personal beliefs, political beliefs, religious beliefs, whatever it may be. You may have nothing in common. You may not like anything about them, or they don't like anything about you. But the one thing you will have in common is neither of you want to suffer. And you can use that commonality to at least use it as a base for your practice. The exercise of compassion here is similar to the loving kindness exercise or meditation. The difference is the difference is that the only addition we add to this is thinking of the 8 types of sufferings that we kind of discussed in the first Noble Truth. So Buddha gives us 8 types of sufferings, right? The suffering of birth, sickness, aging, death, the suffering of being away from loved ones, the suffering of not getting what you want, the suffering of getting things, of not getting what you want, of getting things that you don't want, and the flourishing of the 5 aggregates, the 5 skandhas. And so that's the formula we use versus the may you be healthy, may you be at ease, may your mind be free from suffering. Instead of that type of formula, we use the 8 sufferings in order to build up that compassion for ourselves and for all other living beings. And as we do that, then we're eventually able, hopefully, to let go, right? And letting go here is letting go of what you don't have, right? And which is the desire for the 8 sufferings to not be true, essentially. Sorry, I'm still staring at the children. Okay. That's the 3 intentions. Sorry, I'm stop talking because I'm too distracted. Questions, concerns, emotional outbursts. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yeah. View would be the more correct translation. The thought is still correct because drishti, which is the translation of view, is more drishti more or less means like seeing, right? Is kind of the most correct translation. But right view or right thought is still, either way, it's still correct, right? It's the first checkpoint, right? Like I mentioned before, we have 3 checkpoints of thought, speech, and action. So right view is just the way you view things, and the way we view things is according to our thoughts, our perceptions. So either way would be correct. Either translation would be correct.
And the precept for killing, that applies to sentient beings, not like bacteria.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Sentient beings is more of a modern way of saying things, but I think more accurately is any living being. And bacteria is technically a living being. Technically. You don't see it as a living being, but because it is something that grows into something or becomes something, we can consider it living. But we tend to want to use sentient because we want things to be sentient in order for us to feel any type of way toward it, right? Because let's say a tree, for instance, right? A tree is technically not sentient, right? It doesn't have consciousness, but that doesn't mean it doesn't feel in its way, right? It doesn't mean it doesn't grow, it doesn't die, right? It goes through all the processes of life in its own way, but it's not technically sentient, but it does grow, it does get sick, it does die. So we can consider it as a living thing, just not sentient. But it does feel in its own way. Right. Exactly. I mean, we're all made of stardust, right? Stardust in itself isn't sentient, but here we are, unfortunately, right? And so things can become other things. And because things can become other things, should show some respect. Yes, ma'am.
There's really, right view is really just the absence of view.
Mm-hmm. Right view is absent view. Let me find that quote.
It's really the absence of, so it's taking out the five aggregates or your perception, right? Your way of seeing it.
Right.
I understand that part. So I don't understand the no view part because it's kind of impossible, right? You're going to put your spin on things. You're going to observe the world. You're going to like what we say to the kids at school. Like when I'm working with them, I say, that's your perception, and there's no one to say that your perception is right or wrong. You know, that's your perception of what's happening. And who am I to tell you that what your perception is wrong?
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of work from there. So it's kind of, I don't understand how you can have no view at all.
Easier said than done, right? Yeah, because the quote is right view is the absence of all views. But it's not saying, it's not here, we're not saying your absence of thoughts and opinions, right? It is the absence that your thoughts and opinions are the only correct thoughts and opinions, right? And so if you're saying that my perception is the most correct, it's most accurate, and this is just how it is, that's wrong view. But if you come from it from a perspective of, this is my perception of things, it could be right, could be wrong, right? And so the ability to acknowledge that potential discrepancy is what causes something to be right view or wrong view.
So it's recognizing that yours is not the only way of seeing something.
Correct.
So appreciate others.
Viewpoints or perspectives, yeah.
Does not right view, does not view arise preceding, does it not precede consciousness in the aggregates? So in other words, we have a view, but it's not a view produced by our conscious mind, which is where we're talking about value judgments and good and bad. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like everything, all our senses and everything, our mental formations all come together and they form that view, which then leads to consciousness based on that view, right? So then we might have a conscious view of an opinion about something, but that's not. Because the view itself arises before consciousness, right?
The view arises before consciousness.
Right. It's skanda before consciousness.
So you're saying it's like,
Well, view can only happen when there is consciousness.
Right, they're kind of together, but I guess if we talk about view and consciousness is awareness of our view. Right? So the view is forward, all the stuff is there on the senses and mental formations and all that. And then we become conscious of it. So yes, they're kind of one needs to, you can't really separate the two.
Correct.
But when we talk about right thought or right intention, that arises in consciousness once consciousness has formed, right?
Arisen, correct, yes.
So view and intention are the starting to be the full path, and everything else leads from that.
Correct. Okay, I'm trying to give myself like 3 minutes. Okay. kind of going back to what Linda's bringing up with direction from Leon is, are you going to finish for me? Can you give Dharma talk, please? I'm tired. Non-duality, that's the word I'm looking for. So non-duality, right? So when we're saying right view is the absence of all views, meaning that we don't have dualistic views of things, right? We don't see things as just right or wrong, black or white, beautiful, ugly, etc., right? Things are, our views are very subjective. And because our views are very subjective, that means there's not an ultimate objective truth to it, right? And so when we say, oh, that's, if someone's just expressing their opinion, I'm like, oh, that's just your opinion, right? Or your thought process, or your perspective, or your perception. Could be right, could be wrong. But again, what's creating that wrong view is the idea of saying, no, this cloud is 100% a car. It's not a smiley face. It's not a butterfly. It's not just a cloud, right? Or not even seeing things as, not even seeing the true reality of things either, right? The same thing, the example we give for the car accident, right? When we're questioning, oh, who's involved? Why was the accident caused, right? How many people are hurt or dead or whatever it may be, right? It's the additions we add to things that creates wrong view. When we really don't know all those additions, we don't know all those extra details. We're making it up as we go. And the more we make up as we go, the more wrong view we create, which when in reality, it just is what it is. It's just a car accident. The door just opened. It's just a sound. It's just a smell. It's just a feeling of pleasure or displeasure or neutral feeling, right? It just is. And so being able to see things in that way creates right view.
It's just the ability to stay open.
Right.
Allow different perceptions to come in and not just hang your hat on one.
Right. Because otherwise, if you're in what happens, just think of when we get upset with someone, right? The only reason we get upset with someone is because they did something that we wish they didn't do or say, right? It goes against our view of what just happened. And so the displeasure or the dissatisfaction or the anger we get is because they did or said something that we wish they didn't say or do, right? It goes against what we want, right? Just like if you're in a class and you're telling kids to, be quiet and do their homework, but all they're doing is messing around and playing around, and you get upset. Well, you're getting upset because you're doing something other than what you told them to do, right? So yeah, think of it that way. If you get upset, you have to ask yourself, why am I upset? Right? Yes, ma'am.
Cracking through the aggregates, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's dissolving so that there's no need at all.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Such a bigger topic than it is. The same way we mentioned that all views are wrong views, right? Same thing would be similar to saying that right thinking is no thinking, right? So if you're not thinking about something, it's more correct than thinking about it. But again, it just goes back to the dualistic views of things, right? If there's a comparison, if there's conceit, then it's more incorrect than not having it at all. But view is connected to the absence of self, or the letting go of self, right? Because view, our thoughts, is where our self is created, mostly, right? That's where all the aggregates kind of come together and be like, oh, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is me, blah, blah, blah. So the letting go of those views also lets go of those self-views too. And the more we're able to, melt away those self-views, the more our false views of reality also melt away. But they do work in tandem, if that makes sense. That kind of makes sense to me. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else. Makes sense-ish? It's a whole different topic. I'm trying not to get into it too much because I can speak about that for days. But if you go back, did I talk about it? I did talk about it. So it was a few months ago, we spoke on the 10 fetters, right? The very first fetter was on self-view. If you want to kind of go back to that may answer some questions. I think I spoke about it before I went on my retreat last year, so it would have been, September, August? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have difficulty extending that to this objectively bad people, like serial killers, or even Donald Trump, for example.
You and me both. Okay.
What is your thoughts on that? Extending that to that.
Kind of goes back to the compassion part, right? Where nobody wants to suffer. Even serial killers and murderers and Mr. Oompa Loompa. Nobody wants to suffer, right? But they also don't necessarily have control over their life circumstances and situations either, right? So it could just be you're put into a bad circumstance or situation from birth, right? And you had very little to no resources or situations that helped you escape that. So you're inherently being molded in a bad place, and you became a bad person, right? Not necessarily correct for everybody, but it's part environmental and it's part karma, right? Like, let's say, Mr. D word, I'm not going to say his name. Nature and nurture almost, right? But let's say you know who I'm talking about, right? From a Buddhist perspective, they are an asura, someone who is in a fortunate state of life, right? They are wealthy, they have money, fame, all this other crap. But they're also terrible people who will do anything to get ahead, who will do anything for power, who will do anything for fame and throw others under the bus or whatever, maybe, in order to ascend themselves, right? So it's karma-based. As much as I don't want to agree with that, but it is circumstantial. And we aren't perfect beings ourselves, right? And so there's really not much room for us, for the most part, to say, oh, they're terrible people, when we're not perfect either, right? So that comparison, which is conceit, which is also one of the 10 fetters, right, that holds us back from enlightenment, is part of our problem too. And so even though there are going to be people where we don't really want them to be happy, like, oh, I totally want you to suffer, that's not exactly the best thing to do, because, again, truly nobody wants to suffer. And so we have to attempt to essentially get over ourselves and aspire to be better than they are. And the only way we can become better than they are is to wish them compassion, as much as we don't want to sometimes. Right, Mia? Stephanie, yes, ma'am. That is true. Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. They are also future Buddhas. They will hopefully, sorry, take that back. They will eventually become Buddhas, right? It'll be probably much longer than it'll take you, but seeing their Buddha nature is going to be an important part, right? It's also the practice of bodhicitta, right? Bodhicitta is the mind of awakening, right? It is it's the inherent altruistic wish and desire for all beings to be happy and enlightened, right? And so we can't become enlightened ourselves if we don't develop that bodhicitta within us. And we have to be able to develop that bodhicitta even for those that we believe don't deserve it, which is wrong view, right? Because thinking that they don't deserve it is just our own perception of that, right? There are people who support those other people. They don't see them as a bad person, right? They see them as holy even. But that's their own perception. It's their own view, right? We may think of it as wrong, and they'll think of ours as wrong. So then we go back to, well, who's right and who's wrong? We can't both be right and we can't both be wrong, right? But the true fact is it is what it is. We have to accept it for what it is. Yes, ma'am.
Our teacher, we learn from this other individual who's doing all these terrible things. We realize that human nature is to share all, and so by observing the things they're doing, that perhaps helps us to refine our own behavior. Say, I don't want to, he's doing this or that, I choose not to. And in a way, so he's kind of a teacher. He's giving you an example of how not to live your life.
Exactly.
Too, right?
Exactly. Especially if someone brings up anger in you. It's an excellent source of meditation right there. Yes, ma'am.
Also, for me, it means to feel sorry for that person that's not enlightened and is on that path and so far away from so I kind of look at it that way and hope that at some point they can find a different way.
Right.
And it's teaching moments. I think everything that we see and experience is teachable. It kind of shows you the reality of that person and other people's reality to kind of reflect on where we are and just
and expressing compassion for them, even though they're a wrong person. Have compassion and realize why they're suffering.
Right. And it's practice, right? Practice makes perfect. And so the more you practice meditation, the more easier and natural eventually it becomes, right? Same way we practice and we have to develop our own meditation, right? It's not always easy at first, but the more you practice, the more natural it feels. The calmer you feel, the longer you're able to sit, the better you're able to meditate and focus. And so it's just a practice.
And no self. If I'm not a self, and this other person that I'm trying to find, they're not a self either.
Right.
They're just a set of circumstances and actions. Right? So.
And you can even think of it as they're doing what they're doing because they're ignorant, right? They are doing it because they are suffering so deeply that they're doing whatever they're doing because it makes them feel better, or they believe they're doing the right thing. But if we're acknowledging that they too are suffering, but this is just their way of expressing that suffering, whether we see as good or bad, right? Whether it's inherently or objectively good or bad, it's just their expression of their suffering. And we just see it as right or wrong. Right.
Because the minute I say something about you, then it's I and you, which doesn't mean that doesn't have anything.
Right. Okay. You're way past time, so we're going to close it in, close it here. So we go to chanting. Please join me invoking the Buddha's name 3 times, and then we'll do a chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Start on page 1. Incense in the censer now is burning, all the Dharma realm in every place, auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilling, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body. Homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattvas. Gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time. May it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting our care. Efforts, our wholehearted mindfulness, and the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all beings be companions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. bodhisattvas, may we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home. As to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma and sagely Sangha throughout the Dharma realm and the realm of empties, and 3 periods of time. To the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha Maitreya, honored future Buddha Manjushri, great wisdom Bodhisattva, universal great conduct Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattvas, and the glorious mountain assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. To Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate bliss, Avalokiteshvara, great compassion Bodhisattva, great strength Bodhisattva, earth store great vow Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure sea light Bodhisattvas. Unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear, receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Pilgrim, briefly in this world I am grateful and joyful to hear once more the Lotus Sutra. The Buddha moon is hidden, the son of Maitreya, not yet arisen, and the long night's darkness in between. Only the Lotus Sutra sheds its light, the wonderful Dharma. The Lotus Sutra, whoever copies it, reads it, lives it, they say will be called preacher of the fivefold Dharma, with his 6 roots cleansed, and that he who chants the Lotus Sutra is guarded by a heavenly host. He wanders the world without fear like a lion king. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Please go to page 141, chapter 25. Chapter 25, the universal gateway of the Bodhisattva, perceiver of the world sounds. At the time the Bodhisattva, inexhaustible intent, immediately rose from his seat, bared his right shoulder, pressed his palms together, and facing the Buddha spoke these words: world honored one, replete with wonderful features, I now ask once again, for what reason the Buddha's son is named perceiver of the world sounds, the honored, endowed with wonderful features, reply to inexhaustible intent in verse. Listen to the actions of the perceiver of the world. Hear his vast oath is deep as the ocean, kalpas past, but it remains fathomable. He has attended many thousands and millions of Buddhas, setting forth his great pure vow. I will describe him in outline for you. Listen to his name, observe his body, bear him in mind, not passing the time vainly, for he can wipe out the pains of existence. Suppose someone should conceive a wish to harm you, should push you into a great pit of fire. Think on the power of that perceiver of, and the pit of fire will change into a pond. If you should be cast adrift on the vast ocean, man by dragons, fish, and various demons, think on the power of that perceiver of sounds, and the billows and waves cannot drown. Suppose you are on the peak of Mount Sumeru and someone pushes you off. Think on the power of that perceiver of, and you will hang in midair like the sun. Suppose you are pursued by evil men who wish to throw you down from a diamond mountain. Think on the power of the perceiver of, and they cannot harm a hair of you. Suppose you are surrounded by evil-hearted bandits, each brandishing a knife to wound you. Think on the power perceiver of sounds, and at once all will be swayed by compassion. Suppose you encounter trouble with the king's law, face punishment, about to forfeit your. Think on the power of that perceiver of sounds, and the executioner's sword will be broken to bits. Suppose you are imprisoned in cage and lock hands and feet, bound by fetters, and think on the power of that perceiver of sounds, and they will fall off curses and various poisonous herbs someone should try to injure. Think on the power of the perceiver of sounds, and the injury will be rebound upon the originator. Suppose you encounter evil rakshasas, poison dragons, and various demons. Think on the power of that perceiver of sounds, and then none of them will dare to harm. If evil beasts should encircle you, their sharp fangs and claws inspiring terror, think on the power of that perceiver of sounds, and they will scamper away in boundless retreat. If lizards, snakes, vipers, scorpions threaten you with poison breath that sears like flame, think on the power of sounds, and hearing your voice they will flee of themselves. If clouds should bring thunder and lightning strike, if hell pelts or drenching rain comes down, think on the power of that perceiver of sounds, and at the moment will vanish away. If living beings encounter sore peril, immeasurable suffering pressing them down, the power of the perceiver of sounds, wonderful wisdom can save them from the sufferings of the world. He is endowed with transcendental powers and widely practices the expedient means of wisdom throughout the lands and the 10 directions. There is no region where he does not manifest him in many different kinds of evil circumstances. In the realms of hell, hungry spirits or beasts, the sufferings of birth, old age, sickness, and all these hit bit by bit wipes out he of the true gaze, the pure gaze, the gaze of great and encompassing wisdom, the gaze of pity, the gaze of compassion. Constantly we implore him, constantly look up and reverence his pure light. Is a son of wisdom, dispelling all darkness. He can quell the wind and fire of misfortune, and everywhere the precepts from his compassionate body shake us like thunder. The wonder of his sympathetic mind is like a great cloud. He sends down the sweet dew, the Dharma rain, to quench the flames of earthly desires. When lawsuits bring you before the officials, when terrified in the midst of an army, think on the power of that perceiver of sounds, and hatred in all its forms will be this wonderful sound. Perceiver of the world sounds, Brahma sound, the Sitai sound, they surpass those sounds of the world. Therefore we think on them from thought to thought, never entertaining down. Perceiver of the world sounds, pure sage in those in suffering and danger of death. He can offer aid and support, endowed with all benefit. He views living beings with compassionate eyes. The sea of his accumulated blessings is immeasurable. Therefore you should bow your head to. At the time the Bodhisattva earth hurled, immediately rose from his seat, advanced and said to the Buddha, world on earth, if there are living beings who hear this chapter on Bodhisattva, perceiver of the world sounds, on the freedom of his actions, his manifestation of a universal gateway, and his transcendental powers, it should be known that the benefits these persons gain are not few in the Buddha. On the universal gateway, a multitude of 84,000 persons in the assembly all conceive a determination to attain the unparalleled state of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Let's go to tab 9, page 171. Heart of the Prajna Paramita, the Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the deep course of Prajna Paramita, shed light on the 5 skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-beingness and shadi. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Shadiput, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore, in empty, there is neither form nor feelings, or perceptions, or mental formations, or consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object, or realms of elements, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no path, no understanding, no attainment, because there is no attainment. The Bodhisattvas grounded in Prajna Paramita find no obstacles for their minds, having no obstacles, rating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future arrive at Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore, one should perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequal mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible truth. The mantra of Prajna Paramita should therefore be proclaimed. Gate gate para gate para samgate bodhi swaha. Gate gate para gate para samgate bodhi swaha. Gate gate para gate para samgate bodhi swaha. Beings are limitless, I vow to liberate them. Afflictions are endless, I vow to eradicate them. Teachings are infinite, I vow to learn them. Buddhahood is supreme, I vow to attain it. I vow that from now until the end of my life and in all future lives, until I attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, that I will help all sentient beings in all realms of existence and their suffering. Namo thus come, worthy of offerings, a proper and universal knowledge, perfect in understanding and conduct, skillful being the world through liberation, perfect and complete understanding of all worldly dharma, unsurpassed, night-taming hero, teacher of gods and people, Buddha, the world honored one. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Avalokiteshvara, Namo Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Shiti-garbha Bodhisattva, Namo Shiti-garbha Bodhisattva, Namo Shiti-garbha Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Samanta Bhadra Bodhisattva, Namo Samanta Bhadra Bodhisattva, Maitreya Bodhisattva. Namo great pure sea light Bodhisattvas. Namo great pure sea light Sattvas. Namo great pure sea light Bodhisattvas. Namo Deva guarding Bodhisattvas. Namo Deva guarding Bodhisattvas. Namo Deva guarding Bodhisattvas. Refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way. In this life I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. In the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty in the world. Dwelling in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation. Dwelling the refuge of Sangha, shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation. Taking refuge in the Sangha, in myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold communities to embrace all beings and support their transformation. Citing the sutras, practicing the way of awareness gives rise to benefits without limits. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along